Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's Ask Andrew show, Canada's first family law live streaming question and answer show. My name is Andrew Feldstein, and I'm the managing partner at the Greater Toronto family law firm of Feldstein Family Law Group. We have offices in Markham, Vaughan, Mississauga, and Oakville, and we're able to assist you in all areas of family law. Before we get started with our guest, I want to acknowledge that we're doing this show during the pandemic, so it's very different in that I'm not in the studio at my office and I'm currently at home. So if we have any technical issues, which may happen, I think that's the same for our production as well as our guest. And I just wanted our viewers to be aware. And our guest today is Allison Loucks. She's a relationship alignment coach, and she's the founder of Extraordinary Relationships. She has worked with both personal and corporate clients and is a professional coach recognized by the International Coach Federation. As an experienced relationship coach, Allison is here to speak with us today about blended families, and thank you for joining us.
Be here. It's my honor. I'm excited.
Well, I think right now is an interesting time to be a relationship coach because, as I said earlier, the show is taking place during the pandemic, and that means we're all at home and we're spending a lot more time with our family. And I would think in your business that may be creating some unique challenges. And can you tell me what you've seen happening in terms of your practice at this particular point in time?
Certainly. Yes, I agree. The dynamics are different. There's more intensity, and it really calls for people and families to just even be more, emotionally grounded, with their tempers, and just better, just getting along. Like it's got to be a solution-based kind of a situation. We've got to have our focus on, okay, how can we make this work? We're a team. So it's always got to be that forward kind of thinking that I think will, and a lot of maturity to keep ourselves from losing our minds, basically, with our families. So,
well, I know I've been receiving some calls from people who are doing consultations and their relationships are breaking down during the pandemic. And my first question to them has been, what was your relationship like before the pandemic? Because you don't want to jump and make a snap decision leading you down the pathway to divorce because of this unusual circumstance. And I don't know if you're getting many of those kind of calls.
Not in particular, but I agree with what you're saying. And what I would be telling my clients, like a lot of the women I work with they're divorced, so they're single moms. I work with men and couples as well. But what I would say is that, it really just takes. I wouldn't make any big decisions in a pandemic, pretty much like what you said. I don't think in heightened times, especially emotionally, is a time to be making big decisions. I think it takes, thought and calmness. And if we're jumping to, I think we should not jump to make decisions. I think we should just wait and just kind of hold steady, hold the course. If we're having trouble getting along, then we do the best we can. If we're stuck in the house with someone, we just keep doing the best we can. We be the best human we can be. And we just stay steady.
Well, I think some people have an interesting challenge in that they're used to having busy work lives and being out. And now I think of some people with younger kids at home and how the two spouses, or if one of them is considered an urgent service, are at home 24/7, 365 with the young kids and the other parent. I think that can be a very difficult time and quite the challenge in a marriage.
Absolutely. When one person's holding down the fort and it's just, again, emotions are high. It's just takes so much, I think, inner work and so much mindset just to be like, okay, knowing that it's going to pass, knowing that we're doing this now, but this is not going to stay this way forever. We can get through this. We're going to be okay. It's like these things we need to tell ourselves just to keep moving through, and having our communication be as respectful as possible, even if we don't care for each other. How can we have good communication even if we don't like each other? It's possible.
Well, I'm going to step back a bit to understand a little bit more about your career. And can you tell us how you became a relationship coach and how you started your business?
Absolutely. So my joke is always that my two ex-husbands gave me my career. as a relationship alignment coach. So I always tell people that I work with that the most difficult relationships we have in our life, the most challenging people we have to navigate in our lives, can be our best teachers if we do the inner work, if we do it kind of the right way. So that's always what I tell people. My daughter with my first ex-husband is now almost 23. And when she was 6 months old, our marriage ended. And it was my financial advisor who said, there's this really great thing you should go do. It's this course. I didn't know what it was, a seminar. I said, okay. And it changed my world. I was introduced to coaching for the first time, and the power of the coaching and how it transformed my life, my ex-husband's life, the woman that is now his wife. The three of us raised our daughter together. So what I saw it do for me and the people around me, I was hooked. I was like, this is powerful. This is transformation. This can move the world forward. So I just fell in love with it, and I started coaching general relationship coaching, and then remarried 7 years into that marriage, 2 more children, that marriage ended. So then I really was looking at, okay, I do this X thing really well, so I should probably start working mainly with women after divorce and co-parenting. And so that's how I got into the niche that I'm in now.
That's an interesting background story, and I guess probably more experience than you wanted on a personal level in divorce.
My life has been my work. That's how I say. Yeah.
Okay, I see we have a question that came in. Are there COVID-19 regulations that disrupt visitation rights? And that, I have to say, is a great question.
Yeah.
And I believe there aren't any regulations, but what happened as a result of COVID-19 is that the courts have basically suspended operations in family law, save and except for urgent situations. And the motions that are heard for urgent situations are being heard on Zoom. There can be something called urgent case conferences, and in other jurisdictions, you can have a limited case conference, and it depends where you live. And I say that because the backdrop is what happens when someone says you can't pick up the child. The child's staying with me because the government is saying that they shouldn't be moving between homes. The case law has been really consistent except for one decision, which has said, if there's a schedule in place, the schedule needs to be adhered to, the schedule needs to be followed. If someone is behaving completely reckless, I think that would be a different story, but it's not something that you can say, well, I don't like the way my ex is doing things because my ex isn't properly wiping down. I don't believe my ex properly wipes down the cart at the grocery store, or my ex should be ordering delivery food instead of going to the grocery store. It has to go way beyond that. There's even cases where somebody has said, well, my ex is a frontline caregiver at a hospital dealing in the ER, and they're going to expose the children to the virus. And the answer to that question from the courts has been, well, if that's their business, that they're a doctor or a nurse or somebody who's there, they probably know a lot about taking care of themselves and making sure they're not exposing the children. So the clear answer is, if there's a court order or there's an agreement, follow it. And the other thing I would say is, do not try and take a tactical advantage because of COVID-19. And what I mean by that is, there may not be an agreement, there may not be a court order, and you're thinking, I'm going to try and do something to gain an advantage. The kids are with me. I'm going to dictate time. I'm going to do other things. The other piece the courts have said is, we're going to have a long memory. And if you've been opportunistic during COVID-19, we're going to remember it. It's going to be brought out at a later date. And there probably will be consequences for that decision. So really, I think at the end of the day, it's about treating your former spouse the way you'd want to be treated. And the interesting piece there, and this will get into what we're talking about shortly of blended families, is typically, it really isn't my business to know what my former spouse's new spouse or kids are doing, but it actually is right now. Courts have said it's your business to understand whether or not they're taking appropriate precautions vis-a-vis COVID-19. But I think it's more or less about getting an answer from the other side. And unless you have some really good evidence to the contrary, you're going to be stuck with the answer that they gave. And I know I gave a long-winded answer there, but Allison, I'm going to ask you what you're telling your clients when they get asked the same type of question.
Well, I really loved hearing the legal answers because I wouldn't be aware of that completely. So that's really great information, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, I'm hearing that they're angry with their spouses. I can't believe he did this. I can't believe he did that. Same kind of thing. I miss my children. These are mostly what I'm hearing. And so it's my coaching would basically what you said. It's just like, don't make any decisions, status quo, don't do something stupid. It's really great advice what you gave. So that's what I would tell them too. I don't have any big specific cases of any really big conflict, but just general annoyance.
Well, and I believe a big part of this issue does, and this gets into the whole concept of blended families, because now blended families are creating exposure that may not be there elsewhere. And have you had clients who are calling you up and they're saying, well, I know my ex is pretty good with COVID, but I don't know where their new partner's kids or the new partner's spouse have been, and I'm really concerned about that.
It's such a domino effect, isn't it? It's just one thing leads to the next, and we're all in this together. The answer always, there's not much we can do. So when there's not much we can physically do, my answer would be, just check who we're being. How can you stay at peace? How can you stay, grounded and okay enough so that you don't worry and make yourself crazy? So I just coach them on their mindset and what can you do? Great. And what you don't have any control over, then we just have to kind of go with the flow and be okay with that.
And I would add, if you have questions of your former spouse and what's happening, ask the questions. And if you're in the type of relationship that you don't communicate over the phone with your ex and you do it by text, or you're using an application like Talking Parents or Our Family Wizard, ask those questions on there.
Yes, absolutely.
Put the record out there, find out what's happening, find out if you're worried the former spouse is working or going out repeatedly. Ask, find out the information.
Yeah.
I see we have a question here, which is, if I lose my job as a result of COVID-19, can I renegotiate my child support? And there's another question that I hear over and over again from clients and friends that are divorced about it. And right now, what we're expecting is that there'll be a tidal wave of motions to change. And that's where people ask to revisit the question of support. Mm-hmm. For most people, there's two ways you deal with child support. One is if there's a material change in circumstance, then you can run and change it right away. And two, most agreements and court orders have an annual review of child support. So when you have that annual review, you'll get your chance to have the child support recalculated at the time of your annual review, and you may prefer to wait until that period of time to avoid having to prove whether there was a material change, even though there was, but it may be more expensive. There's going to be issues of cash flow for people. Some people are phoning and saying, I got laid off, just like this question asked, and I don't have any money coming in right now. How can I pay my support? Best answer we have is do the best you can. It's better than nothing. Do the best you can. And even though that question was dealing with child support, there's a very real issue for a lot of people with spousal support that there'll be a material change in circumstance for this year and how the courts are going to deal with it. And I tend to think it means both sides have to appreciate this. I mean, I hear one story from a friend of mine who says a dentist who is not allowed to work because the College of Dentists have said you're not allowed to work right now. So all dentists are basically shut down except for emergency work. And the dentist spouse is insisting that the support should continue. I think it's rather obvious that you're going to be successful in your claim to reduce support. And if that was my client who was the recipient, I would also tell them that they need to act reasonably, because at one point in time, you may end up in front of a judge. Yeah. And if you sound and look like you're a pig, they're probably not going to be impressed with that, because we're not in a day right now when somebody cries that their business is down, where in the ordinary course, it's like, okay, you're trying to say your business is down because you don't want to pay support. It's pretty obvious that most people's businesses are down. I know mine is down. I'm assuming after this is over, we'll get back to normal, but people have to act reasonably. And I don't know if you're getting questions from your clients that they're concerned that their support may dry up or concerned about paying support?
You know what? One of the biggest things I'm saying these days are when emotions are high, intelligence is low. When emotions are high, intelligence is low. So it's not the time to try to work, like we said before, work big things out. It's not the time to have big discussions because we're not in an emotional state to be that solution oriented. But it just comes down to the same thing again. It's just, I'm not hearing anything too specific about that, mostly just little annoyances. And I do believe people have to be flexible. People will have to be realistic. People, like you said, they have to understand. This is where this maturity comes in. We're in this time where everyone's struggling. So let's give a little more to the people we, can't stand even. Let's give a little more room for them, right? Like, let's just try to all be the best people we can be. That's always the bottom line.
I look at it and say that any agreement that I've ever done in the past never contemplated a pandemic. And when you're saying an agreement does not contemplate a pandemic, I tend to think courts are going to be sympathetic to the fact that your income is impacted. It's obvious it's going to be. So I think those are some really good questions that have related to COVID-19 and concerns people are going to have.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to a non-COVID-19 question for you right now, which is, what would you consider the major factors that can affect the relationship between a child and a step-parent?
That's a very good question. So I would say power and respect. We're always behaving to meet our needs, and we have 5 basic needs. And I won't go into them in great detail, but it's fun, power, love and belonging, survival, that encompasses food, health, and our sexuality, and power. So I think I did the 5. So we're always behaving to meet a specific need, and power and respect come to mind the most when I think about this dynamic. And the way that we have our children or our stepchildren respect us and the way that we get along is very different than what I think most people would think, but it's actually through connection. So the more we are connected and the more we get along with our exes, with our children, with our stepchildren, the more influence we actually have with them. So if we want respect, as the parent, as the top-down leader, we be respectful, and that's how we gain respect. So you have to model it, and you have to watch the power struggles, and you have to just kind of have a team atmosphere, like we're in this together. How can we make this work the best? Inclusion is always bringing people into the conversation so the children, especially if they're older, have some power in this, instead of thinking, I have no power in this. The adults are just doing whatever they want to do, so I'm just going to be a jerk. You know what I mean? So it's the more that everyone has an inclusion sense of a spirit, then I think it can work out better. So power and respect and disconnection are the biggest things to watch out for.
So that makes me think about that I probably deal in a lot of high conflict cases. And I have the high conflict client who comes into my office and they bring their current partner in, and the current partner says, I don't get any respect from the stepchildren. The stepchildren don't make it very clear they don't like me. I know that the stepfather or stepmother on the other side is encouraging that. What do I do about it? Be
you and just be, I mean, if we're expecting and we're wanting to get something more than we're getting in that moment, it's an energy that is not conducive to team. It's like, I want this to be good and it's not good. We should be getting along and we're not. You don't respect me because of your mother, blah, 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 blah. She just needs to step down, stop expecting so much, and just let it flow. Just if she concentrates on being the best woman she can and being a wonderful person, you can't help but get respect. You can't help but get, cooperation. So watch your expectations, watch your demands, and the shoulds. Whenever we're shoulding, it should look like this. It should look like this. We should be getting along. You should respect me. So those shoulds, there's just a bad communication. It's a bad relationship kind of a habit. So I stay away from that.
I think a lot of my cases, probably communication is an issue, and people will obviously say that the trouble with communication is with the other side. But it's a matter of trying to get somewhere. When you say to a client, you need to work on that, and they say to me, well, there's nobody for me to talk to at the other end. And that's a common question I see. And they are saying, well, how can I make it better knowing I'm not going to get assistance from the stepfather on the other side.
Yes, yes. Communication is such a slippery. I think we've been taught a model of over communication. So when we're dealing with our exes, and especially if we don't have a good relationship with them, we want to act like colleagues. We want to take the emotion out of it. So it's just got to be emailing back and forth. Just the facts, just the facts, just the facts. Take out all the that has no place in the co-parenting relationship. So I think the communication has to be, again, solution focused and just very, very simple.
And
yeah.
do you recommend your clients to use an application such as Talking Parents or Our Family Wizard? I believe there's some others now.
If it's high conflict, yes. If it's high conflict. My job with my clients are really to teach people how we can get along the best that we can. So I don't have a ton of high conflict clients that I'm working with at the moment, but they've come from conflict, or, you know, it's, yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second.
That's fine. Well, I guess where I'm going with that is, do you get many clients who are in a high conflict relationship? They're separated or divorced, and they come to you to say, I believe my former spouse is wrong. The other spouse thinks they're wrong. And they come to you and say, we know that we're each pointing fingers at the other side, but this isn't good for our kids. What can we do to make it better?
Yes. So the pointing fingers, obviously, the better every adult behaves, the better. The best thing we can do for our children is to behave as best we can as adults, because we're modeling it for them. So, you know, how do we work things out? If we can't work things out with a parent who's not involved, then you just have to communicate in email. Even if you don't, I would just say, just be in communication. Even if they're not communicating back, just be in communication, because then you know that you've done the best job that you could, and you've let them know this, or you've let them know that. So just keep trucking, basically.
And what are some examples of parenting behaviors that you would describe as self-destructive? As
destructive. So there's about 7 relationship habits that and there's probably more that we describe as destructive. And then there's about 7 or more that we describe as constructive. So the destructive ones, I mean, they're criticizing, which is the worst. They're blaming, they're nagging, they're punishing, there's demanding, there's defending. It's all of these things that make us feel controlled in a relationship. Those are the ones we want to stay away from, because when we bring that control in, we lose influence and we lose respect. And it's a slippery slope. Our relationship foundation starts to just disintegrate. If we're using these habits once in a while, it's not a big deal. But if we're using them all the time, then the foundations start to disintegrate of the relationship. So it's becoming aware of them too. So we've been trained in a lot of them. We've been trained to nag our kids. We've been trained to say, you get dessert when you eat your broccoli. That's control. But we've been trained into this environment thinking that some of these habits actually help our children. So it's really becoming aware of what you're doing. What ones are you mostly criticizing? There's usually the go-to ones that we have. So becoming aware of them and then shifting into, okay, I'm going to use constructive relationship habits. So I'm going to be accepting and trust and respect and negotiating differences and win-win-win solutions. So it's really a shift in perspective, and we start with observing ourselves, and then we can start new habits.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of a dynamic that I regularly see. One spouse says, when the kids are with me, my former spouse tries to manage the kids. So I pick the kids up at school, and he immediately phones them on a cell phone. Then I get home, and before dinner, he or she either calls the kids to say, what food is your father or mother serving you? Then 2 hours later, the parent calls back again. Have you done your homework? And then you get into the communication of the parent who is on the receiving end of that saying, stop calling, stop communicating that often, let me parent. And to me, that's a really unhealthy parenting dynamic that I see more often than I would like, that puts them in a very bad spiral. How would you get them out of that?
So yes, I totally hear that. I would actually, again, what we resist will persist. So what we resist will persist. What we accept, we can have some peace with. If that was me, I would let that parent keep calling. As long as I'm not the one answering the phone, if that child or that teenager wants to keep answering the phone, go at it. I'm taking myself out of that equation, because as soon as I step in and say to my ex, stop it, stop calling, I'm trying to control. I can say that, but there's no power in it. So my power is let them go at it. You know, if the phone ringing's driving me crazy, I'll ask my kid to turn the phone down, or I'll go in another room. But because it cannot keep going. It's going to die. That behavior will subside. But as soon as the attention is on it from the spouse or the ex, more energy goes into it. What we focus on grows. What we take our attention off. So it's all about.
I guess as a lawyer, I look at it from a different perspective than you do. I look at it as saying, okay, when this is happening, we need to shut it down. I'll make a request of the other side's lawyer, who will probably agree with me that there shouldn't be more than one call a day. And then if it persists, the next time, I won't bring a motion for it, but the next time I'm in court at a conference, I'll ask a judge for an order limiting the number of calls. And more times than not, I'll end up getting an order that limit the number of calls.
If it's harassment and then that could be a different story. But in general, just for like typical, not high conflict, but just aggravation, I would just ignore it. But in high conflict, then I could see if it was in interfering with my life and with my relationship with my child, then that would be a different story.
Okay. And what type of resources would you recommend for parents that they could turn to?
In general, or do you mean, well, I have a wonderful kind of 5 tips free gift on my website. They're actually 5 tips to end stress with your ex, and it involves these habits that we were just talking about. So that's something that's on my website. If people want to go and grab that, that is extraordinaryrelationships.com/free tips. So there's free tips there. I mean, I would say inhale as many books as you can, inhale as many powerful radio shows as you can, hire a coach, surround yourself in a vacuum of transformation and positivity, and keep your attention on your growth. And I have also a wonderful program for women that's coming up. So I know we didn't talk about this too much, but for women that are healing after divorce and want to move into a new relationship, or if they're already in a relationship, but it's not what they want it to be, or it's just not working. So this course is called Magnetic Attraction, and it's for women who want to delve into a 6-week journey online with me, and I call it our love alignment journey. So we look at transforming all the relationships we have in our lives, starting with ourselves. So that's really a beautiful program for women if they want to put themselves in a really powerful container for the next 6 weeks, especially while we're dealing with this pandemic, and just work on themselves and work on what they want. Then that's a beautiful program that I have available. And I think the link will be somewhere on your site. So, yeah.
And if people want to visit you, your website is extraordinaryrelationships.com.
Yes.
And what other services do you provide?
Well, I have so there's a quiz on the website that's kind of neat too. It shows you if your ex is kind of controlling your life. So people like the quiz that's on there. That's a free quiz. I have programs that I run. I have one-on-one coaching. So I have one-on-one clients. So if people want to they can just kind of peruse the site. If they want to reach out to me and ask me questions, that's totally cool. Basically, I work one-on-one, or I launch group programs, and I'm always launching a program about every 2 months. So there's different ways people can work with me. There's lower price points and there's higher price points. And
all of your work is done online?
Online, over the phone. We work on Zoom when I'm leading my programs. We do this. We do Facebook Lives for a lot of coaching that I do. I have a coaching corner I do once a week, so people can come on, and it's a free Q&A session. So that's called Coaching Corner with Ali. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Allison, for being on the show today. It was a pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure to be here.
And for anyone interested in learning more about Allison and her work, I know we've mentioned it before, but you can visit her at extraordinaryrelationships.com. The next Ask Andrew show is on May 12th at 1:00. I'm really hoping that we'll all be back at work and life will have started to return somewhat to normal by then. And if you have any requests or ideas for future shows, please email them to us at info@feldsteinfamilylaw.com. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.